Julius Caesar, Part 5, of the Lives of the 12 Caesars, by Gaius Suetonius Tranquillus. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Graham Redman. The Lives of the 12 Caesars by Gaius Suetonius Tranquillus, translated by Alexander Thomson and edited by T. Forrester. Julius Caesar, Part 5, paragraphs 80 to 89. For this reason the conspirators precipitated the execution of their design, that they might not be obliged to give their assent to the proposal. Instead, therefore, of caballing any longer separately in small parties, they now united their counsels, the people themselves being dissatisfied with the present state of affairs, both privately and publicly condemning the tyranny under which they lived, and calling on patriots to assert their cause against the usurper. Upon the admission of foreigners into the Senate, a handbill was posted up in these words: "A good deed. Let no one show a new senator the way to the house." These verses were likewise currently repeated: "The Gauls he dragged in triumph through the town, Caesar has brought into the Senate house, and changed their plaids for the patrician gown. Gallos Caesar in triumphum ducit, idem in curiam Galli brachas deposuerunt, latum clavum sumserunt." When Quintus Maximus, who had been his deputy in the consulship for the last 3 months, entered the theatre, and the lictor, according to custom, bid the people take notice who was coming, they all cried out, "He is no consul." After the removal of Cyzicius and Marullus from their office, they were found to have a great many votes at the next election of consuls. Some one wrote under the statue of Lucius Brutus, "Would you were now alive," and under the statue of Caesar himself these lines: "Because he drove from Rome the royal race, Brutus was first made consul in their place. This man, because he put the consuls down, has been rewarded with a royal crown. Brutus, quia reges ejecit, consul primus factus est. Hic, quia consules ejecit, rex postremo factus est." About 60 persons were engaged in the conspiracy against him, of whom Gaius Cassius, and Marcus and Decimus Brutus were the chief. It was at first debated amongst them whether they should attack him in the Campus Martius, when he was taking the votes of the tribes, and some of them should throw him off the bridge, whilst others should be ready to stab him upon his fall, or else in the Via Sacra, or at the entrance of the theatre. But after public notice had been given by proclamation for the Senate to assemble upon the Ides of March, the 15th of March, in the Senate house built by Pompey, they approved both of the time and place as most fitting for their purpose. Caesar had warning given him of his fate by indubitable omens. A few months before, when the colonists settled at Capua by virtue of the Julian law were demolishing some old sepulchres in building country houses, and were the more eager at the work because they discovered certain vessels of antique workmanship, a tablet of brass was found in a tomb, in which Capys, the founder of Capua, was said to have been buried, with an inscription in the Greek language to this effect: "Whenever the bones of Capys come to be discovered, a descendant of Iulus will be slain by the hands of his kinsmen, and his death revenged by fearful disasters throughout Italy." Lest any person should regard this anecdote as a fabulous or silly invention, it was circulated upon the authority of Gaius Balbus, an intimate friend of Caesar's. A few days likewise before his death, he was informed that the horses, which upon his crossing the Rubicon he had consecrated and turned loose to graze without a keeper, abstained entirely from eating, and shed floods of tears. The soothsayer Spurina, observing certain ominous appearances in a sacrifice which he was offering, advised him to beware of some danger which threatened to befall him before the Ides of March were past. The day before the Ides, birds of various kinds from a neighbouring grove, pursuing a wren which flew into Pompey's senate house with a sprig of laurel in its beak, tore it in pieces. Also, in the night on which the day of his murder dawned, he dreamt at one time that he was soaring above the clouds, and at another that he had joined hands with Jupiter. His wife Calpurnia fancied in her sleep that the pediment of the house was falling down, and her husband stabbed on her bosom, immediately upon which the chamber doors flew open. On account of these omens, as well as his infirm health, he was in some doubt whether he should not remain at home, and defer to some other opportunity the business which he intended to propose to the senate. But Decimus Brutus advising him not to disappoint the senators, who were numerously assembled and waited his coming, he was prevailed upon to go, and accordingly set forward about the 5th hour. In his way, some person having thrust into his hand a paper warning him against the plot, he mixed it with some other documents which he held in his left hand, intending to read it at leisure. Victim after victim was slain, without any favourable appearances in the entrails. But still, disregarding all omens, he entered the senate house, laughing at Spurina as a false prophet, because the Ides of March were come, without any mischief having befallen him. To which the soothsayer replied, "They are come indeed, but not past." When he had taken his seat, the conspirators stood round him under colour of paying their compliments, and immediately Tullius Cimber, who had engaged to commence the assault, advancing nearer than the rest, as if he had some favour to request, Caesar made signs that he should defer his petition to some other time. Tullius immediately seized him by the toga on both shoulders, at which Caesar, crying out, "Violence is meant," one of the Cassii wounded him a little below the throat. Caesar seized him by the arm, and ran it through with his style, and, endeavouring to rush forward, was stopped by another wound. Finding himself now attacked on all hands with naked poniards, he wrapped the toga about his head, and at the same moment drew the skirt round his legs with his left hand, that he might fall more decently with the lower part of his body covered. He was stabbed with 23 wounds, uttering a groan only, but no cry, at the first wound, although some authors relate that when Marcus Brutus fell upon him, he exclaimed, "What! Art thou too one of them? Thou, my son!" The whole assembly instantly dispersing, he lay for some time after he expired, until 3 of his slaves laid the body on a litter and carried it home, with one arm hanging down over the side. Among so many wounds, there was none that was mortal, in the opinion of the surgeon Antistius, except the second, which he received in the breast. The conspirators meant to drag his body into the Tiber as soon as they had killed him, to confiscate his estate, and rescind all his enactments. But they were deterred by fear of Mark Antony and Lepidus, Caesar's master of the horse, and abandoned their intentions. At the instance of Lucius Piso, his father-in-law, his will was opened and read